Who created God?
What created God?
If God did indeed have a beginning, by the simple logic of cause and effect, there had to be an agent, separate and apart from the effect, that caused it.
So then I want to know where God came from.
Who created God? Who created the person who created God? Who created the person who created the person who created God?
What these YouTube atheists just did was give an example of the fallacy of infinite regress.
And what you just did was not include me amongst their number. I find I'm quite hurt. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. Meet YouTuber Questioning Atheism, who obviously has a thing or two to say about the problem of infinite regress, the who created God argument. Have a look.
Who designed the designer will go on ad infinitum, right? Of course, right. And that's illogical.
Well, of course it's illogical. That's the whole point. The religious side is always making arguments like, look at something as complicated as the eye. That couldn't have just happened on its own. It needs a designer. Well, what could possibly be more complicated than something that can design complicated things? By what logic, by what evidence can you claim that the act of designing terminates with your God, assuming such a creature even exists? I agree that the sequence of creators has to have a beginning, but how do you justify stating that the starting point was a God? And that it was your God? And if not design, what was this God's origin?
But the question, who created God, begs the question which automatically assumes that all things must be created.
No, it really doesn't, because the question is actually there to show how ridiculous your assertion is. You see, most atheists have listened to the evidence provided by the scientists who say that no, the universe was not created and didn't need to be, that certain laws of physics and nature created the universe we know today, no help whatsoever, no God required. Yes, there are still a few mysteries, but now we're looking at the God of the gaps fallacy, plugging your deity into the places where I don't know is really the appropriate answer. And yet you insist that God is the origin of all things anyway, despite the rather obvious begging of the question on your own part. And that is why the question is asked of you, who designed the designer, in the hopes of getting you to realize that your own position is tenuous at best, utterly ridiculous at worst.
A theist says, no, God is eternal. If that's true, and theism, whether it's old earth or new earth creationists, believe that the designer is eternal, then it's illogical for a theist to even argue the question in that form.
You won't argue the topic unless certain premises are accepted first? How is that not begging the question? It's like you won't even consider the possibility that you might be wrong. And to shore that up, you won't discuss or debate unless certain advantages are conceded to your side right from the start. In what possible way is that honest or fair? You do realize that if you present enough evidence which can be independently verified, you do have the possibility of swaying the mind of an atheist, right? So here's a wild idea. How about lending us the same courtesy?
However, let's assume, as atheists typically do, that the universe is the self-contained answer to the reason for mankind, as well as everything within the natural universe. So now, the question I propose to an atheist, using their own assumption: who created the universe, that created the universe, that created the universe, that created the universe?
That's just it. Most atheists don't think it was a who at all. It was a what, namely the laws of physics and nature. Well, you might ask where those laws came from in the first place. Dunno. Yet. We're looking into it. But until we can figure it out, you have no justification for injecting your God into those blanks. Not unless you're prepared to prove that he's real. And even if you do, we're still left with a mystery on our hands. By all the evidence we've ever had, nothing can have existed forever. Yet you claim your God has done this. Why should we believe that unless you can justify it in the same way that science can justify, say, evolution? Evidence is key, yet you demand faith of us instead. Can you understand how some of us might not be really eager to play along? But let's suppose for a moment that it wasn't nature, that it was something supernatural. Why couldn't it be something mindless? Some supernatural force that jumped at the wrong time, something that zigged when it should have zagged, and shaboom! Big bang. How can you say that it was your God and not that instead? Why should we believe your side?
The only way an atheist can answer comes down to the same thing: the illogic of infinite regression.
Except that's not really our argument. It's our reason for rejecting yours, because you ignore this problem and expect everybody to take it for granted that your God is the beginning of all things. But here you go, putting words in our mouths, and you know what that means.
That's a peddling.
Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think. Droids don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when their videos aren't rated. Bionic dances are known to do that.